Hey guys, so this is the third part of the Huben K1 version 2 review, accuracy, disassembly and everything video. So this will be for the disassembly and reassembly of K1. This is probably going to be a long video, so I will probably later decide if I want to split this video in maybe two. So for example, have a disassembly video and then a reassembly extra video, just to make it a little bit more manageable, not so long and boring. So I think we can get started. We can disassemble it. So I have some tools here. So the most important for you will be different Allen keys. They are all in metric, so you will need metric Allen keys. So first, of course, I will take off the scope because I don't want to risk damaging it when I took the gun apart. It's not actually quite necessary to put it off, but I do it anyway. Okay, second, the bipod, we don't need it. Also not necessary to take it off, but slightly easier to work with the gun if it's not on. I will probably fast forward some of the parts of this assembly just to make the video slightly shorter. Some things that take longer and are clear what I wanted to do. So when you have this, so basically now I just have the gun. When you have this disassembled, there are two things you have to remove in order to get the stock off. One of them is you have to push out this pin. And the second thing is you have to fully remove the power wheel. So let's start with the power wheel. I believe you will need Allen key, 2.5 millimeter Allen key, I think so, yeah. And just hold the power wheel. So let me put this like this. Hold the power wheel when you loosen it, and then take it fully out. You might want to have a box or something like this to put your parts in. So power wheel, now you have this plate that is for indexing, and I'm dropping already things down. Okay, and now you get to this part when you have 4 balls. There are ball bearing balls. They are fixed inside, so you don't have to worry that they will fall out. And now you have to have a sort of a tool to put in these 2 holes and rotate it anti-clockwise, basically unscrew it. And I use my pliers for that. Just let me get them. So pointy pliers work for me, and I just put them in holes and then I unscrew it, and then fully unscrew it until it comes out. So put it in holes. It might come off like this, so only this part, or it might come off with this long tube. Either way, it's okay. So now the only thing that's holding it together is this pin over here. Now the things that I'm doing right now are still have nothing, so basically I'm just removing the stock, have nothing to do with if the pressure is in the gun right now or if it isn't. I still have it charged now. You can drain the gun first and then start to do this, or drain it. I usually drain it after I took the stock off, take the stock off, because it's easier to drain it. I will show you in a moment. So what I'm doing now, I'm using Allen key 3 millimeter, and I'm just pushing the pin out. Here's the pin. And now the stock should come right off. Okay. So as you can see, I still now have this tube on the gun, but sometimes it unscrews here. In that case, you would have the tube and also this part on on this part still when you take it out. That's also fine. The only, not problem, but the only bad thing is that sometimes if you drain the gun first, it will unscrew actually here, so this brass part will come with it outside, and in that case, when you unscrew this, you will hit your this brass part on the rod here, and that's of course not good because you will have pieces of brass all over the place when it will scratch it when you will turn it. So that's why I prefer leaving the air inside when I take off the stock. And also the second reason is because it's much easier to drain it now. All you need is their Allen key, or I believe it's number 5, so you can have also other Allen key that's number 5. And you put it in the regulator and just turn it down. Turn it down and until it starts to, so I'm turning it anti-clockwise, until it starts to drain out the air. So do it slowly in the end, so it slowly lets out the air. Okay, it's out. So no matter how I turn it, it's out. So this means that this cylinder, the regulator chamber, is now actually empty. And this is actually all you need to drain in order to work on your gun. You don't need to drain the whole cylinder. You can if you like, but you don't need to. Unless you have some repairs that you would have to, for example, if you have a leak here, or here in front of the regulator, in that case you would have to drain also the other air, and I will also show you how to do that later. But for this purpose, for this video, we won't do that because I can basically show you almost everything. Or maybe we will do it. We will do it because we will remove the regulator as well, so you can see how the regulator is assembled. Okay, so let's move forward. I don't have the front clamp on. That's why I don't have to remove it. Just let me get it, so I will show you how to remove that as well. So here's the clamp. It's on the gun like this. I won't be able to fit it through it, but it should be here. And all you need to do is loosen up these two Allen keys, which I believe are number 2.5. No, actually, yeah, 2.5 millimeter. You loosen them, take it off, and that's it. And so now this cylinder is drained, so we can continue to work on this. This is safe. And now what we will do is actually take the complete gun apart. So basically remove the barrel, remove the action and everything else. So now you have to unscrew these 3 screws, which should be number 3 millimeter Allen key. You have to fully remove the front one, because otherwise it's not possible to remove the shroud. But the rear one you can only loosen, you don't have to fully unscrew them. Okay, that's enough. The shroud should go off as soon as you remove the front screw. So all you do is pull it off. Okay. Now when you did this assembly for the scope and everything else, the clamps, it's already free to move out of the gun, but the trigger is still holding it in place. So what I usually do is take like a pin or a very small Allen key and push out this pin that holds the trigger in place, which in my case doesn't seem to want to go out for some reason. It goes now. Okay, so the pin is out. This means that I can take the whole trigger out. Okay, the trigger is out. And then also the best way is to unscrew this rear screw, which holds the rod in the back, on the back side. I believe it's 7 millimeter. No, it's smaller. Smaller. Yeah, this one. So 6 millimeter. Just unscrew it out. And again, pay attention that you don't lose any of your parts. So we can put that aside, we don't need it right now. So now I can already take off the clamps. Just pull them forward, off. We don't need those right now. And the next thing, cheek rest, cheek piece, whatever you call it, just slide it forward. Now of course, as soon as you loosen the clamps and take them off, if you put everything back together, you will probably need a slight re-zeroing of the scope. That's why, because I take the gun a lot of times apart and I don't want to lose my zero, I actually did this. This is one of the simple things you can do to have this option to disassemble it a little easier. So you can see here that there is like a hole which is cut on the upper side. Originally this only a hole and it's no cut on the upper side. So I did this cut. I basically chipped off on the both sides, so to make like a cut on the upper side on all of this. I hope you can see this, on all of this plastic, let's say, flat surfaces. And that is because I want to have an option to pull this off like this. Basically not to disassemble the gun at all. So I can do this actually even if I have fully assembled, stock on, scope on, everything on, and I can just pull it off and take it off and access this rear part without having to take apart the front side. So this is up to you. I did this for myself. Originally it won't be possible to do it, so you have to do this yourself to be able to take it apart a little easier. So I'll put the cheek piece on the side. And now the best thing is to remove the cylinder. To remove the cylinder, all we have to do is take out this screw on the back of the regulated cylinder. Again, Allen key, 3 millimeter. And take this part off, and now you can turn the cylinder left or right. Just make sure you hold it over here and turn it fully anti-clockwise. Sorry, I think it's clockwise. Yeah, clockwise, and then you can pull it out. So this is not a perfectly round part. Just let me get this in focus. As you can see, you push it in and then you turn it in order to lock it in place. And there's an O-ring here to make sure that it's sealed. So we don't need the cylinder right now, we will get to the regulator later. Now we have the barrel and the action here. And let's start taking apart the action. So first we will remove the barrel, and to do this we will unscrew these two screws. Actually loosen one screw, unscrew, sorry guys. So unscrew this screw, this one, this top two screws, and just loosen this one. So the one that needs to be loosened up is this one, and for that you'll need a 3 millimeter Allen key. Again, you don't have to fully unscrew this one, just loosen it. And for the top two you will need 2.5 millimeter Allen key. So these are this one and this one. Don't unscrew the screws that are under these two screws. So let's get it in focus again. You have this screw get more light. You have this screw, and you have one more in here. Don't unscrew this one. It's marked with red color. Also, there's a red spot on the top. These two screws and these markings are there because these are used to align the barrel with the magazine. So this is two very important screws that if you don't have a misalignment problem, you should not change. If you do have a misalignment problem, there is a procedure which is quite hard to do, and if you're not skilled, I don't recommend doing them. But in any way, what you have to do is you have to unscrew these two screws just a little bit, leave the magazine on. So I will show it now. So now basically I only remove the barrel. You have to unscrew these two screws partially. So this one, they are marked with red, and this one. Just loosen them up, and then you can see that this part is made of a front part and back part, and the front part can be moved according to the back part. Now I won't take this apart because I have it perfectly aligned right now. I will try to show it on the camera. It's really hard to do, but basically that is the way you should align it if you have this problem. But again, I don't recommend doing this yourself. It's not easy, but if you need to, you might have to do it. And again, if you want to do that, you loosen these two screws, which are marked with red, and tighten them just enough so it holds in place. And then move this rear part until you get a perfect alignment, and then just tighten them. That's the way to do it, but again, it's a very time-consuming task. It's very hard to find the correct position. Also, you have to rotate it and check on every position, because everything has a tolerance, and you might find that on some holes it's a little better to have it a little bit more this way, and some holes a little bit this way. So what you have to find is an optimal medium, so a midpoint in which it's the best for all of the holes. This is not really a tolerance issue, but every mechanism that is moving has its tolerances, and the placement of the hole in front of the barrel has its tolerances, although are very, very small, so very high. I think you say high tolerance means that the measurements are very small, but you know what I'm trying to say. So basically, this is one of the alignments of the barrel, and the second alignment is how the grooves of the magazine are aligned to the grooves of the barrel. So the magazine also has grooves. I don't think I will be able to show. I will make a picture and I'll show it to you later. But the magazine actually has grooves inside, and these grooves should fit, so should match the beginning of the barrel grooves. And this is a very, very important thing on Huben for the accuracy, because this determines how if the pellet or the bullet gets damaged when it goes through transition from a magazine to the barrel. So again, barrel alignment I don't recommend doing yourself. If you absolutely must do it, you can do it, but it takes a lot of skills, and you should only do it if you're confident that you're good at things like this. So basically I won't take this any further apart, because my barrel is aligned perfect, and also my grooves are aligned perfect. So for the grooves you will have to untighten this screw, and then just rotate this part on the barrel in order to get them aligned, and then tighten this nut back down. Again, mine is perfect, so I don't recommend doing this unless you absolutely have to. There is one thing I did to the magazine to slightly improve the smoothness of the operation. These holes, which have grooves inside, are quite sharp on this end. So this is the barrel end of the magazine. And what I recommend that you do if you have also sharp edges is that you have some really fine sandpaper. I'll just get mine. So I'm pretty sure that you won't be able to get the same one in US, but in Europe we have the P1000, which I'm not sure, but I think it means that there are 1000 parts per square millimeter or something like that. Anyway, place this sandpaper on a very hard and flat surface and put the magazine with the front part, so the part where it is touching the barrel, on it, and just scratch it a couple of times in each direction, and make sure you're always holding the whole surface tightly to the sandpaper. And of course, when you do that, after you do that, you clean the magazine well, so you don't get any small parts of steel in the barrel when you shoot later. So this is one thing you can do to improve a little bit the smoothness of your magazine. There's also one part that I won't disassemble here, but because I don't think it's necessary. It's this indexing springed ball. So basically what this makes sure is that when the mechanism, which is in the inside of the, just let me get this magazine on the barrel. So basically when the mechanism, which is in the inside of the magazine that indexes the cylinder, this one actually locks it in place. This is a very important part, and this one makes sure that it's in the correct position. So that's, I think, everything in regards to the magazine and barrel alignment. I won't go into details how to align the barrel because it's not easy, and I can do a separate video and post a comment if you like to see me do that, but again, it's not an how would I call it, exact science. It's not something I can say have this and make sure it's on this. It's not that easy. It's looking through it, and you also have to pay attention that you look very straight in the axis through it, and then turning it and making sure that it sticks out just appropriately. So it's quite a hard thing to do. Anyway, enough of this, and let's continue with the action. So we have the action here. Piece is already falling out. So basically this is the rod that is connected to the power wheel, and then this rod turns inside the screw that it's actually for regulating the velocity. Basically what I will do now is disassemble this up to a certain point. Maybe an important thing for you here would be to know how to improve your trigger. And I didn't do any modification on the trigger. I did only one thing. On the back side, let me get this focused. On the back side you see you have two screws, 1 and 2. Now the one that is, let's put this in the correct orientation, so this is looking the gun from the back side. So the left one, or actually the right one on this side is spring tension for first stage of the trigger. It's not actually full first stage, it's just what you feel before you get to the second stage. You can actually have a longer first stage and controlled by an additional spring, but this is the last part of first stage before you before the trigger actually releases, so before you take a shot. And this one is actually, let's say, sort of for the second stage. So what you want to do is unscrew this one in order to make the spring softer for the second stage, but please make sure that it's still safe. So basically you need to still feel force on the second stage, otherwise you went too far and you made the gun dangerous. So don't screw it too much. In my case it is just flat, just about flat with the surface of the back plate. And for the other screws, so for the one for the end of first stage before the second stage starts, I actually remove the spring and I put a much weaker inside. So I can show you. So both screws have this spring on it, and this is the strong spring, and the left one or the middle one, however you want to call it, because it's in the center, should have this spring. It's very important because it's a safety issue. And the second screw, I exchange the spring for, I will show you just a second, for this one. So much weaker and longer. And this enables you to have a soft first stage and slightly harder second stage, which is ideal trigger. And I always set up the front part. So this is the front part. This is the part that is actually adjustable from the outside. So this is the screw, and this top of the screw is what you adjust to have some first stage, and then in the second stage you start to pull on the rod forward. But I actually adjust this a little differently. I always screw this screw in fully. You must not tighten it. Just get to the end when you start to see that the rod is moving with the trigger always. There's no free first part of the movement that it's not moving. And in that case, the spring inside, which is this small spring, I don't know if you can see it, but it's here inside, it's actually not in use anymore, because by default that spring inside this trigger is actually a first stage. But when you screw this in fully, you don't have that first stage anymore. Instead, you have only the very short part of the stage that was before for the second stage used, and now it will be for the first stage. And after that you get immediately a very short pull for the second stage. So in my case, that's an adjustment you can make yourself and have a really good trigger without really doing any modification to your gun. Because all you need to do is change the left spring, so the spring on the side screw, and then adjust the hardness of the first stage and loosen up the second stage, but make sure that the spring is still under tension to make it safe. Otherwise you don't want to have random misfires, of course. That's one thing you can do yourself. So basically screw on the trigger the screw almost fully in. Don't tighten it, just make sure that the rod is moving with the trigger always, and replace the left spring on the rear side, and then adjust according to your wishes. This will make your trigger a little lighter, but for me the most important thing is you won't have this feeling, because when the gun comes you will have the relatively long first stage, and then you will get to what they probably call second stage, but there's still some spring tension that is stiffer than it was the first stage. Before you feel another knee. So basically you have two knees that you feel. First is the first stage, then you have a knee from the spring that you should replace to have a better trigger. And then after that you have actually the actual second stage where the gun is going to go off. And that is the spring you should not change, you should leave, and that one is in the middle. So you remove that first stage and you only stick with the first part of the second stage, which will now be your first stage. And in the end you only have the crisp and relatively light pull of the second stage. I hope I understand it. I hope you understood what I was trying to say. I hope I explained it well, but this is really an improvement you can make without changing any of the major parts. All you need is to find some small light spring. That's it. Okay, so let's move forward. Now I won't be taking the mechanism apart, because this on the version 2, that's probably the only thing. It's not that I don't like, it's that I don't like the fact that it's very hard to take apart, and I actually haven't done it yet. So the trigger mechanism is inside the accessible only from the bottom side of the action, and you have to push out some pins to get it out, and it's very hard to reassemble. At least I think so, because I haven't done it yet. But if you don't need it, don't do it. If it's necessary, then I would probably recommend it that you send it to some official service, because it's, in my opinion, very hard to take apart, and you will have damage marks on the external side of your action for sure, because of the removing of the pins and everything like this. There is one more screw that you can adjust the tightness of the safety. It's on the bottom side, so we are looking at the bottom side of the action right now, and it's right here. And if you screw it in, the safety will be tighter. If you screw it out, it will be lighter, but in my opinion it's already quite perfect as it is. Okay, so as I said, I wouldn't disassemble the trigger, and I won't do it also in front of the camera. Let's get to the points that can be disassembled and may need to be disassembled for maintenance reasons. And let's start from the, let's say, front side. So front side, over here, we have the what is let's say equivalent to transfer port on other guns. There is a plastic part inside which you can take out, and it has an O-ring also inside. And the plastic part looks like this, and the O-ring goes in this groove. And this part is because when you fire, there is high pressure here, and this high pressure forces this plastic part to push onto the magazine to make a good seal. Of course, there's a seal to make sure that the plastic part seals as well. And this also pushes the magazine forward and presses up against the barrel. So basically, you have a much better seal than you do with the conventional revolver start firearm, which is basically has some gap, and over here it's actually pushed forward. It's also should be pushed forward and in firearms as well, but I'm pretty sure that the seal here is better, because otherwise you would feel it on your neck or something like that when you shoot, and you don't feel virtually anything. So that's I would say clever design. But anyway, if you have some air escaping and you feel it on the neck, it's possible that this O-ring is bad, or that this plastic, there's something wrong with this plastic part or something like that. But it's definitely not a failure that would then your gun would be useless. For example, it won't leak air because of that, because this is only under pressure in the time of taking a shot. So it's not that big of a deal if there's something wrong with that spring O-ring. Okay, let's put it back in place. This has to be flush. Okay, next thing, you have a screw up here. This wasn't present on the version 1, but the version 2 has it. And if I assume that this screw, because it's nothing underneath it, it's just a transfer port, I assume that this screw is used in case you have, and this happened to me actually once, that I broke a spring and the magazine was not aligned with the barrel, and I took a shot, and actually I had leftover of pressure here. And it leaked very slowly. Actually, it leaked in about 15 minutes. So what you can do is just untighten this screw and then leave that air, that pressure out to be able to freely rotate the magazine again and fix your problem. I believe, but I'm not sure, I never had the need to do this. This one is the similar thing, but the only difference is that this is not for transfer port, but it's for the actual backside of the firing valve. So I'm not sure actually, but I'm pretty sure that that's because it's lying behind the valve, and it's just between the two valves, because Huben, as you know, have one vertical. This is the closing valve, and the opening valve moves like this, and this one is just in between. So I guess this one you can release the air in case you have some problems and the air is stuck in between those two valves, and of course before you disassemble you have to drain it somehow to fix it. Now the version 1 had a plate here, and you could access the trigger mechanism very nicely here. So that is one thing I like about version 1 a little more than I like in version 2, because if something wrong, you just take the plate off and you can do whatever you need to do and put it back together, and it's much easier than in this case. I'm not actually sure what this screw does. It might be for releasing the whole trigger mechanism down, but I haven't tried to do that yet. Back here I have two screws. If you unscrew these two screws, you can actually take out the opening valve, and we'll do that later. And down here is the brass nut. If you unscrew this one, then you can access the closing valve. And in front, so this is the pin actually that indexes the magazine. It's under a spring tension, so you can push it up and down. And over here we have a spring for disengaging the indexing magazine from the magazine, so you can freely rotate it. And on this both sides, so this side, you can take this plastic part off, which is a protector so the pellets doesn't fall out when you load them, and also afterwards. And under this plastic part, we will take it off later, is a very important brass screw which holds in place and seals the pin, which is in the other side, used then for indexing the gun. I will show this later. And on this side you have this part, but it's made out of metal, and you have 3 screws to unscrew. So here one, second, and the third one is underneath the lever here inside. And we will take this off as well. And maybe it's time for me to mention another modification, not really a modification, but thing you should pay attention to in order to avoid some problems. As you might imagine, if I take the magazine is actually over here. Well, let me place it the correct way. It's actually over here, and it rotates like this. And you don't want anything sharp on this flat surface. It should be as flat as possible in order not to catch the pellet or a bullet when the magazine rotates. So this whole area has to be very flat, and especially in one direction, in the direction where the magazine rotates. So for example, over here it's moving from this side towards this side. So you shouldn't have any edges sticking out this way, because the pellet will catch it and it will either damage the pellet or it will make your alignment with the barrel for a certain shot blocked by that pellet, then you will have big problems, because the pellet might get stuck in a barrel or something like that, because the barrel, the magazine won't be aligned with the barrel. So that's why it's important. So pay attention to this edge. This edge is actually a little bit how they call this, smoothened, so it's not sharp, because the pellet is moving this way. Also this edge, so let me try to show this. This edge, when it goes from plastic part to the aluminium part, so to the action part, it's already smoothened off. But in my case, this part, which you can clearly see now that it has been scratched, was sticking out a bit. So what I did is just took some material off on this part, also the inside part, and also the external metal part. So you want to remove everything that can present a problem, can catch a skirt or something like that on the pellet. Okay, so let's start by removing the part by the gauge, the metal part by the gauge off, so you will be able to see the indexing mechanism. Take the 2mm Allen key, should be the right one, yes. So 2mm Allen key for those 3 screws. And this is under spring tension, so be careful not to lose anything when you unscrew the last screw. I actually unscrew the middle one last, because in that way I have the most control on how it's going to go off. And don't over tighten these screws. This just barely have to be tightened, so you don't destroy the screws by unscrewing it a lot. So this doesn't hold any pressure or anything like that, that it would be have to be strong. So now that I took this apart, this is the part I took off. I already lost one screw. So let me try to show you this. Second screw came off. I'll just take out the screws so that I don't lose them. So in my case, as you can see, this part I take off a little bit material, because it was slightly protruding out. This part sits in here like this, and then it's pushed out by the lever to disengage the indexing of the magazine, and it protruded out a little bit on this side, and so I took it off a little bit here just to make sure it's flush. I actually took it a little more than necessary just to make sure that it won't catch a pellet. But anyway, this is this part, and let's check the other side now when I took this part off. Okay, so over here is a spring. This spring returns the indexing part to its starting position immediately after the shot is taken. So after the shot is taken, there is no pressure in the chamber, and because there is no pressure in the chamber, this spring overcomes the tension of the pin that is pushing the indexing pin up. And this spring is just strong enough to overcome that force of that pin when the pressure is low, so immediately after the shot. So this is milliseconds after the shot. And of course, right after that, the regulator fills up the chamber again, and this chamber gets filled again, and then pin again gains the strength to overcome the tension of the spring, and it rotates the magazine for one, indexes the magazine for one chamber forward. So basically, before you take a shot, the indexing pin is up because the pressure is high, and immediately after the shot the pressure is low and the spring overcomes the pin, it moves down, and it catches on the next teeth on the inside of the magazine, and then as the pressure rises, again when it's refilling the action, the pin is again overcomes the spring and moves up again and indexes to the next chamber. That's the mechanism. So basically, if you look at here, this is the pin, and this moves up and down. I will try to show you this. See, up. This is basically the position that is now is actually a stable position, because when the pressure is inside, it's always up, and after the shot, this spring pushes it down, and when it fills again, it again goes to this position. And what you do with the lever when you disengage the indexing position, what you do is force this down despite the fact that there is high pressure in the action, and that allows you to rotate it, and then when you pull it down again it will go up in its position. So okay, so let's take this spring out now. It's quite a long one, and let's take the indexing part out. This is covered in grease, and that's a good thing because this has to be smooth. Okay, so this is the indexing part. So the pin that catches on the magazine is over here, and there's a small flat spring here that pushes it down, so it, as you can see, moving up and down. Then this is the spring that broke in my K1 version 1. That's actually the only problem I had with K1 ever, is when the spring broke. And over here inside, so is the pin that is actually goes in the chamber, or I should say in the action where the high pressure is, and this is this small pin. It's 2.5 millimeter, and this small pin by the pressure on the other side of so the inside of the action is creating the force to overcome the spring tension and rotate the magazine for the index magazine for one turn. And this small pin will access it from the other side when we will take this plastic part off. And this small pin has an O-ring on it that is very important and can be one of the reasons of leaks. And that is why I will pay a little more attention to this part. And the way you can know that it's this O-ring is a cause of your leak is by paying attention. For example, when you pull the lever up or pull it down, and one time you have the leak and the second time you don't have it, because you're moving that pin, and the O-ring sometimes seals and sometimes it doesn't. So that is let's say a point of failure in terms of holding the pressure in. So let's remove the other side, the plastic cover. Again, I believe it's 2 millimeter, yeah, 2 millimeter Allen key. Again, don't over tighten these screws. They are not holding anything important. The metal part is actually holding that pin in, but three M3 screws don't have to be over tightened in order to do that. So we have the plastic part off now, and over here you will find a brass nut which has a flat screwdriver to put out. Sorry, I sometimes don't know the English word for some parts. So what I will use is a flat screwdriver, and this part definitely does not have to be tightened very hard. All you do is tighten it until you feel a slightly bigger force, and don't over tighten it, please, because there's no need. All of these parts that have O-rings and are under pressure don't need to be over tightened, because the pressure itself and the O-rings will make sure that they don't unscrew. So don't over tighten this part, you will only end up destroying them. So before I fully disassemble this, let me just show you this. So this is the part I took out. Basically it has like a hole inside and also in the middle, and there's an O-ring on it. And this O-ring usually doesn't fail, because this is a O-ring that doesn't move. So this is a static O-ring that only makes sure that the screw doesn't leak air from the threads. And in the inside now is the pin. And we can push this pin out. I recommend that you push it from the side where the gauge is to the other side, because that way you will push it out with the O-ring. So I will just do that now on the table, I don't want to lose it. Actually, the O-ring in my case still stayed inside the action. So this is the pin. It's as I said, 2.5 millimeter pin. That's the surface area that you need to have enough force to index the magazine when you have the gun filled to the regulator set to 170 bars or less, of course. Now you can see that now that the hole goes right through. Just let me focus this again. It goes right through, and inside you have the O-ring, which I will try. I even have two. I'm not sure if that was stock or if I put two inside. That I'm not sure of. So these are the O-rings that are sealing, and in my case they are still in good shape. They have a lot of grease on it, and they still doesn't look damaged. These two seal the pin for indexing, and they are quite a common failure, just so you know. Okay, so we have the pin out, and now we can let's say some people, I heard that they have problem that the leak is by the gauge. This is usually not the gauge problem, the gauge fault, but it's usually a problem with the O-ring on the gauge. Just let me get an additional tool. Actually, it's just a knife. So on the side where the metal part was, let's get it in focus again. On the side where the metal part was, there is a small pin which you can push down, and after you do that you can rotate the whole gauge like this. Rotate it for 90 degrees counterclockwise, and you can take, in my case, as you can see, the pin stuck on the gauge, so I will just carefully take it off and place it on my table. So inside this hole there was a pin, and there's a spring underneath it, as you can see here, and the gauge removes similar to as the cylinder does. As you can see over here, you have a very small O-ring. This can also be a problem if it doesn't seal perfectly to the back side of the action. You can have a problem and you can have a leak. So this is one thing you should consider checking out if you have a leak close to the gauge. Okay, let's put the gauge over here. Okay, so let's move to the next thing, which will be the brass part. So we will take a look at the closing valve. Again, I'll have to get additional tools. So what you do is unscrew the brass part. In my case it's quite tight. Okay. Unscrew the brass part. There's an O-ring here, of course, but this is a static O-ring, so it shouldn't present a problem. And in here, first of all, you have the flat surface and calibrated spring. This spring is very important, and there is also some O-rings inside because this has to seal. This part has to seal to the inside of this part. And as you can see here, you have like a small hole, which is not actually a hole, just a dent, in which the screw, which then pushes up and down this this flat surface, is placed, and that is your power adjuster. And the only way you're adjusting your power is moving the location of how far down, so under spring tension, can this part move. You don't actually change the tension of the spring. You're only regulating the location, how far you can push this down. And of course the pressure, when the action pressurizes, it pushes this down fully until it sits on that screw. And when it pushes down fully, it's actually you can regulate by adjusting the end point of this. You can regulate how close the closing valve is to its closed position. So basically, when you turn the power down and you rotate the power wheel clockwise, you are placing the location of the closing valve closer to its closed position, and vice versa, of course. You might have a problem in this inner O-ring, which is quite hard to remove. But anyway, this is something that is very hard to fix. You have the problem because it's hard to access. Not that it's a special O-ring. The O-ring is totally standard. I haven't had problems with that yet, and I also didn't hear that anyone does. I will try to, because this video will be long anyway, I will try to stick to the things that are actually really problematic and can be an issue, and things you need to know and you can do also yourself. And I won't go into details in the things that I don't recommend and I don't think that you should do yourself. So okay, so over here was the brass part. I will remove now the closing valve. So this is the closing valve, and now you have a free hole inside, and there is a hole that goes from here and into this part where the closing valve is. So basically it goes, the air goes from here and into the closing part, closing valve chamber. And this is the closing valve. Let's try to get focus. And this is where this limiting, so the power adjuster flat surface presses against. Let me get this in focus again. So it presses on this, and this valve this is only let's say a spacer that makes sure that the valve is in the correct position, and this is under spring tension again. I'll try to show you this. So this goes out. If I push this in, again focusing problems, it goes out. See, just a little bit. It's a very stiff spring. So what this, how this operates is there is a seal inside of the hole where this closing valve is placed, and this closing valve presses up against that seal. It's a plastic seal, so you can, I think in my case it just drops out. Not sure. It doesn't want to go out right now. Let's try to get it out. Yeah, I got it. So again, let's try to focus. This is the seal, and it presses up against this seal like this. So the spring tension moves it up and it presses up against this seal. And what you will notice if you take this apart, that there is a slight dent, so let's say cutaway in the valve right here. That's because this closing valve must not completely seal the air from flowing into the opening valve, because immediately after, so basically this valve is open before you take a shot, and when you take a shot, this valve closes, and the pressure in the opening valve, which is now closed, open by force, by air pressure, in that chamber, then pressure drops in order for it to close by spring tension, and of course eventually this one will need to release again and let the air go into that part again, so it slowly leaks inside that opening valve, in front of the opening valve, and that what causes to refill. And then when the pressure in the opening valve, so over this valve, is the same as, or when the pressure is again high on the opening valve, it will again open this valve by force, so the spring tension will overcome the pressure tension and it will open back up again. So this is basically the operation. So there's actually no way that the closing valve will be a problem for leaks. That's not possible, because the closing valve actually doesn't hold air permanently. It just holds it for a fraction of a second in order for the opening valve to close. Okay, so let's move to opening valve, and I will remove the screws I showed you before with Allen key number 3. Okay, got it out. And if you look at this part, I will now first remove the spring for the opening valve and the baffles. So basically, let's remove the screw as well. So this is what holds in place the opening valve. So the opening valve, when you fire the gun, hits back, compresses this spring, and there's a rubber buffer. Anyway, it dampens down the vibration, the hit when it hits back, and this is this part. So this is important that it's on it, and the dimension of this part is also important in order to have the correct travel of the valve on the back side. There's also an O-ring here on this part, as you can maybe see it. Again, this O-ring doesn't, it's not a problem if this O-ring doesn't seal correctly, because there shouldn't be a pressure on this back side. Okay, so the next thing is to take out the opening valve, and this is sometimes hard to do, because you have to hold the trigger. In our case, that shouldn't be a problem because we removed the screws that hold the trigger in place. But there's still one additional spring inside, which will hold the hammer, sorry, not the hammer, the valve in place, and it will be hard to take out. So what you need to do is have something that it's not too sharp at the end. Maybe even it's better if it's not metal, if it's plastic or something, because you don't want to damage the front of the valve. And then you have to pull the trigger and push it down. And I don't have anything good here to use. Okay, got it. So this is actually the force that the valve has to overcome when you fire. And now we have the valve out and the back plate of the valve. Let's start with the valve. So the opening valve, it's actually only this part. So this part moves forward and backwards. As you see, I stretched it out now. and that is to reduce the force on this valve when it opens, because otherwise the full force would strike back. But this way, actually, when the valve is in the position before firing, it's stretched out like this. So basically the force of the pressure of the air is also closing the valve and also pulling it back. But it cannot go back because on the back side there is this part, and this part is connected to the trigger, and the trigger won't allow this to go back, and that's why the force is actually towards the front, towards the seal of the opening valve. And then as soon as you release this one, the force back on this part overcomes the force forward on the seal, and it fires everything back. And after the closing valve shuts down the airflow, the pressure in this front part of the valve drops, and the spring, which is in here, back here, pushes everything forward again and catches the sear of the trigger. So that is the procedure. These two parts, so the brass and the steel part, are sealed together, and there, I think, you cannot do anything about it. If there's something wrong with this, if this falls apart, only leaks, you have no choice but to contact Huben and get a new valve. The inside for the opening valve is actually also quite complicated. There is one O-ring on the back side of that hole, which can be a failure, and that way it would leak through the back side, the valve would leak through the back side. And there is, of course, a seal for the valve itself. And now the seal for the valve itself, Huben has sent me, and I can show you. Huben has sent me some spares for that front part, but you need special tools in order to replace them, and these are the seals. So basically what you have is a metal part and a plastic part. Plastic is the actual seal, the metal part is what locks the seal in the position, and you need two tools. One of them is for I believe the bigger one, I think so. It's for getting the old seal out. So basically you have to ram this in and then pull out everything. So plastic plus the metal ring. And then you place a new set of seal and ring, the metal ring, and you smash it back in. So basically you place the new seal in. Now, I'm not sure how if Huben is willing to, or if the distributors have these tools, but anyway, if one of you has a problem and you do have spare seals, but you cannot do the replacement yourself, I can give you the exact dimensions of these two tools in order for you to do that. Okay, so now we're at the end of, let's say, disassembly of the action, which is the most complicated part and should be only done if it's absolutely necessary. Okay, let's move to the chamber and the regulator. So you have a high pressure chamber, and this is the regulated pressure chamber. Now this one is drain out, and I can unscrew it, as you can see, from the regulator right away. Same thing with this part, you can unscrew it and you have the totally same O-ring and the same everything, so I won't do that, I will just show you on this one. Now this chamber is still filled with pressure, and we will drain that chamber as well. Just wanted to show you first what you can take apart before you do that. So over here you have an O-ring here, and this is the regulated chamber, and this you can also unscrew the front part, so the filling side, without emptying the main chamber. So over here you have some options. I know that in version 1 they put some filters inside. I don't think that version 2 has anything, but this is just a filling port, nothing else. The one-way valve is actually in here, so that's why it's still pressurized. Now in order to depressurize this chamber, what you have to do is, after you can have this on, but you have to have the regulated chamber open on one side so the air can escape. And then what you do is just slightly open the regulator. By the way, before I do that, I want to show you that you can actually play with the regulator washers without emptying this chamber. So what I did is unscrew this nut fully. I unscrewed it fully out of the regulator, so this is the nut. I will put it here. And now you can actually take out, I will go to this side. You can actually take out the spring and the rod. So just be careful, you won't lose any washers. So I'm taking it out now. Okay, got it. I will just place this here. So I'll just turn this. So this is also one thing you can, let's say, change or optimize as per your needs. By default, what I got is I had, so right now I have two washers placed in one direction and two in the other, and again two in one, two in the other, basically. So I have this stack. I have two per each side. What you can do, and by the way, that was how I got the gun by default. I had a stack of three, so three one way, three other way, three one way, three other way. And of course, if you have more washers stacked in a single direction, then the washers, the total force of the washers is bigger. So that means that you can achieve bigger pressures. But if you have less, it of course means that you cannot achieve that high pressure, but it also means that you can achieve more accurate pressure, because the movement, so the spring is softer in that case, like in total, and in that case you have more movements per change of pressure, which means that it should regulate it more accurately. And in my case, that is the case. So basically I use this configuration. I use two one side, two other side, and etc, etc, etc. Make sure you use all of them, because if you don't have enough of them, then you won't be able to screw it in enough to have the pressure you want. You can get still up to 190 bars even if you have this stack, so two per each side. But the thing you should know is, if you do that, when you will change the pressure, when you will increase the pressure, it will jump much higher, and then you have to take a couple of shots, and then it will stabilize to certain pressure. So for example, if I want to set it to 170 bars, I have to go almost to 220 by this screw, and then when I take a couple of shots, it will settle to a certain lower pressure than I set at that point. I will put these washers over here, not to lose them. And if you take this apart, please apply some silicone grease on it, because this part is very good if it's well lubricated. The regulator will be much more accurate in this case. Yeah, of course I have to put this back in, because I want to release the pressure out now from the unregulated chamber. So the way you do that, you basically screw in and start adjusting the output pressure, and it will start to leak here. And just use the Allen key, and so it doesn't drain out too fast, because if it drains out too fast, it will cool down the O-rings and the whole cylinder up to a point when they are they can potentially break. So you don't want to destroy the O-rings by letting out the air out too fast. So just keep it in the control. I can already feel that the cylinder is very cold. It's really cold. Okay, I think we're done. Yeah. And in that case, you can now unscrew the whole regulator of the cylinder. Okay. So now you can take a closer look at the regulator. It's looking at it from this side. It's easier to confuse and not know which is the entry hole, so the entry side of high pressure side, and where is the low pressure side of the regulator. But you can tell this by looking inside of the regulator, and let's try to see. You have only one hole on the regulated side, so this is the low pressure regulator side, and this on the high pressure unregulated side you have actually two small holes on the very back of that. It's probably not going to be possible for you to see that, but let's try to turn the camera like this. No, sorry guys, just trust me. The unregulated side has two and the regulated has only one hole. Okay, now what I will do, I will leave the washers inside for now, and I will take out the whole regulator. So this is basically the black part is the housing of the regulator, and the silver part is the actual regulator. So just unscrew this. In my case, I could do it with my fingers. Again, parts that are under pressure does not have to be tightened down too much, because the washers, the O-rings make sure that you cannot unscrew it when under pressure. Okay, so right now be very careful. I usually place it like this to make sure that everything stays in the regulator itself. So okay, let's take a closer look. Okay, so this is the housing. As you can see, you have one hole that's going right through the regulator. And there are also some holes from the both sides, of course, of the regulator, which enables the regulation itself. And there is one O-ring that is usually on this part, but in this case it stayed inside of the regulator. And this is a potential failure of the regulator. So if you have a leak, this O-ring is possibility for the reason of the leak. And also this O-ring, this basic O-ring, if you take the regulator out a lot, can be the problem for the leak. Okay, now let's look at the regulator from close-up. So this is the whole regulator. This pin sticks out and there is an O-ring on it, so it doesn't leak outside, because all this part is under pressure. Over here we have a regulating screw, and inside, of course, we have the springs, the washer springs. I will take them out now. Again, please lubricate this and make sure you don't have any dirt inside. I will, when I finish with this assembly, I will clean it and make sure that there are and lubricate it. Make sure no dirt is inside. Now, when you have this out, you can pull out the top part of it. This is usually not very easy to do because there is a O-ring inside which is quite tight. Okay, I got it. So in my case, the original regulator came with the white O-ring here. So the top black part here is made out of plastic, and the bottom is an O-ring. And what I did is replace that white O-ring because it was slightly damaged. It wasn't leaking, but the regulator didn't regulate correctly. It was because the O-ring was slightly damaged, and it was harder to move this part inside of its chamber because it blocked the movement. That's why it didn't operate that well. But anyway, this is the O-ring that is important, and this one make sure also that it's well lubricated, and it's also a point of failure if your regulator doesn't work correctly. That's about it. This is the flat surface. Let me show you this again. This is the flat surface where the rod seals up to. Also very important. So this end of the rod, which contains the spring washers, has a plastic flat surface which seals up against this brass part. So let me try to show you this together. First get it in focus. Okay, this seals up to this, and if this plastic part is damaged, this is also something that you cannot really buy anywhere. You have to get it from Huben, I guess, if that's the problem. And this is also only a housing, only a tube. So from this side it's a regulator, and from this time it's washers with a rod. And that's about it. So basically these are, let's say, points of failure that I know of. Now, of course, every O-ring is a point of failure, but the ones that are subjected to movements, so basically the O-rings that seal a moving part, it's a much higher chance that it will be a problem, of course, because it's moving. So basically, I think we disassembled as much as needed. I'm not sure if I could or should take anything more apart. I would like to take this apart. Maybe I can show it on version 1. I'm not sure if it's different on version 2, but this is screwed down so tightly that I'm just not able to get it off, and of course I'm not willing to hold it with a wrench or something like that and scratch it. So basically over here there is a hole like this with an O-ring inside on front as well, and after that it's O-ring and baffles and end cap. So nothing really special about that, I think. I mean, the system itself works really nice in terms of dampening the sound down, but nothing special about the design. It's like the same as I think in version 1. At least I think so. I think that's it. Let me clean this up and we'll start to reassemble.